Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by Stanley Cup champion, Olympic gold medalist, and author, Theo Fleury. Theo, welcome to the show. Excited to talk to you. We love to have professional athletes join us. Hockey players, I think you might be our first hockey player that we've had on. And so I would love to just kind of get a take from you. Your NHL career began in 1988. Did you always know that you wanted to be a professional hockey player? Was there any other path you may have taken?
Yeah, no, when you grow up in Canada, hockey's like religion in Canada. It has its own culture, it has its own space, it has like everything. And so from the very first time I stepped on the ice, I had this dream that maybe someday I would love to, play in the NHL. And basically my whole entire childhood, I focused on that dream. And I don't know how many 6-year-olds that basically go around their small little town, and anybody that would listen to them, I would say, someday I'm going to play in the NHL. Oh yeah, I knew it from the very. But there's a back end story to that. So both my parents suffered with addiction problems, and hockey was like my sanctuary, right? Mm-hmm. And everything that I wasn't getting at home, when I stepped into an arena, I got love, I got teammates, I had people who looked after me because we were really poor, right? So the arena was that place where everything that I was lacking at home, I got it in the arena, right? And so I fell deeply head over heels in love right away, with hockey, because it gave me so many things that I wasn't getting at the time. And I spent 9 years playing hockey with the same 13 guys.
Wow.
The same 3 coaches, right? That really sort of set me up for my whole entire life, because I learned so many things about respect and love and caring for your teammates and consequences and all the, I often get an opportunity to speak a lot to parents, right? Mm-hmm. And I say to them all the time, the reason why you put your kids in sports is not to create professional athletes. The reason why you put your kids in sports is to create quality human beings and set them up for the rest of their life. And that's what happened to me. Was I got the blueprint for success playing minor hockey in a small town in the middle of nowhere, but it really did set me up for the rest of my life. It set me up to be successful.
Wow, it's so interesting.
And to be a good human being, right? A good, solid human being.
You're so right and so spot on with that. I mean, I grew up playing pretty much every sport you could imagine. And that is one of the things that I always thought about, even before I had kids, was I can't wait to, of course, it's fun to see your kids, however they perform in any sport. It's fun to see your kids do things. But you're right. I always knew that it was truly what formed me into the human being I am today, was the fact that I was on all of these different teams. And some of them were very, team centric, which obviously hockey is. Some of them were very individualized, like say track or cross country.
Yeah.
But it all kind of goes towards the same, discipline, and there are certain things that you take out of playing sports and being on a team that I think are very applicable to life. But I think what's interesting about your story, Theo, is I wonder, and maybe I'm sure you've thought of this, had you not had some of the kind of tumultuous situation at home that you had, do you think you would have ended up being a professional hockey player?
No, because the great thing about adversity is it builds resilience.
That's right.
Right. And I don't think as a society we've done a really good job of building resilience in our kids.
Amen.
right? And here we are in this woke culture, this entitled culture, is because we haven't allowed our kids to go through the adversity to build the resilience in them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hence, look at the state of the world, right? And
Absolutely.
it's because our generation was all about adversity. Our parents allowed us to have adversity. They allowed us to build resilience in us. And so here we are, patriots now, because of that experience, right? Is like, we know when something's not right in the world, and we are going to stand up for those core values and principles that we grew up with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think so often about the generations that are coming up right now. Maybe the generation that is about to, I don't know, graduate from high school or college or just starting the workforce. And my family happens to be small business owners. My parents and now my brother, also a small business owner. And what I often hear from people who own small businesses anywhere in the country, for sure, I hear a similar story about the younger generation coming into the workforce, which is that they have been fairly coddled. As you're kind of suggesting, they haven't been allowed to, build some resiliency. They haven't seen a lot of adversity. And at the smallest suggestion of perhaps some sort of a critical critique of some variety, maybe somebody says, oh, here's a better way to do this, or, I didn't really like how you did X, Y, or Z. These are things that happen in life. These are things that happen when you start a job and you have to adapt to them. These people just melt like a bunch of snowflakes, and they can't handle any sort of criticism, although it's constructive and part of, them performing in their jobs. I wonder, like, where are we going to be in 50, 60, 70 years if this is what we're doing to our future leaders of America and the world, quite frankly? Like, where are we going to be in all of this? I always wonder.
Well, we have a prime example of that happening in Canada right now. Prime Minister Trudeau is one of those kids who was coddled his whole entire life, didn't have to face adversity, trust fund baby guy, and look what he's done. He's turned our country into a country that's almost unrecognizable because of his, the way that he leads people, right?
Yeah.
And there's been no accountability whatsoever. Those of us who try to, make him accountable, we're shunned from any conversation, that's out there. So, that's a perfect example of the kind of leadership that is around the world right now.
Yeah,
right?
it's really,
and hence, here we are, in the biggest shit show that we've ever seen in our lifetime. And it's because nobody has any resilience to anything.
Gosh, I know. Well, I'm going to go back to hockey in a minute. Otherwise, my husband's going to kill me if I don't at least ask you a couple of hockey questions. Mm-hmm. But I want to get to, you're commenting obviously on Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, and you're Canadian, you're born in Canada. And, a lot of people, once they sort of have a platform, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to speak out about things because then you get canceled, you get called out, whatever. You've been very out front and outspoken, more and more so, I think, over recent years. Why did you decide to do that? Because a lot of people don't do that.
Right. Well, I was so uninterested in politics, okay? And when I saw your father-in-law come down the escalator in 2015, I was like, what the hell is Donald Trump doing running for the president of the United States?
Yeah.
At that time, I didn't know if I was a conservative, a liberal, libertarian, green, patriot. So, of course, I started paying attention, right?
Yeah.
So started watching CNN of all things, right?
Bless your heart, man.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to tune into, Theo. I got to be honest.
No, I know, but I needed to do the research, right? I needed to do the
Sure.
research. And, you know, as I was watching CNN, I'm like, something's not right. Some doesn't feel right. So then I switched over to Fox, and then I went, oh my God, okay, I get this now, right? One side is for this, one side's for this. Well, I really like, you know, the Tuckers and the Shawns and the Laura's of the world. I like what they're doing. And so ultimately I figured out I was a patriot, where I was a freedom-loving, free speech, I believe as a citizen of Canada, I have 3 responsibilities: pay my taxes, vote, and stay out of jail. And other than that, I don't need the government involved in my life at all. Don't need them involved in my life. I'm very capable of looking after myself. And not only that, when I'm successful, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to give back to society, you know? And so the second half of my life, that's what I've done. I have this amazing story of, trauma in my life, throughout my whole entire life. I have this trauma story.
Yeah.
And I told that trauma story in 2009, and it absolutely changed the trajectory of my life and put me in a place of being of service to whoever would come my way, right? And so I truly believe that trauma is at the core of every single issue we have in society. Starts with trauma, right? And so trauma leaves us in emotional pain and suffering. And what's that emotional pain and suffering? That's mental illness. Any kind of emotional pain is mental illness. And so how do we deal with this emotional pain and scars that are left behind from just being on this planet? Well, we tend to gravitate towards the dark side of life, and we get involved in addictive behavior as a coping mechanism to suppress the emotional pain and scars that are left behind, right? And then we're ultimately faced with the ultimate choice. Am I going to live or am I going to die? And I would say 99.9% of people want to live, but they have no idea how to live, right? So here we are. COVID-19 is the most traumatic event that's happened since World War II. So we already have a traumatized society, and we've added another layer of trauma on top of it. So early on in COVID, what did we see happen? We saw a spike in opioid use. We saw a spike in mental illness. We saw a spike in suicidal ideation. And then ultimately, we saw people taking their own lives. And I truly believe that that is completely unnecessary and doesn't need to happen. And as a society, we've done such a poor job of creating safe spaces for trauma stories that here we are. And what is the actual real pandemic? Is mental illness on the planet. And if we don't do something about it, we're in big trouble.
Well, I think that's right. So what is your what would you say is the first step sort of in the right direction to, tackle it? Because it's a huge challenge. I mean, it affects people in a variety of different ways. Mental illness, I think there's a lot of undiagnosed mental illness certainly out there. But what would you do, first thing?
Well, we got to get rid of big pharma in the mental health space, right? They've done more damage than good, right? And I'm a guy that's spent $1 million on therapy. I'm a guy that's done every kind of therapy known to mankind. And the most effective, cheapest kind of therapy is a little thing called group therapy, where you get a bunch of people in a room, you use vulnerability, which is storytelling, to create a safe space. And then once you have the safe space, what happens? People just start popping up and telling their stories. Wow. And so I'm a big proponent of peer-to-peer counseling.
Fantastic.
Where people who've had the same experience relate to each other, and then they go on a path of healing together, right? Where they're supporting, sharing, loving, caring for each other. And I've used that model in my own, not my own, our own foundation here in Canada called Breaking Free Foundation. And then I also belong to a global mental health organization out of New York called We're All a Little Crazy. And that's the model that we use, is we have a whole bunch of people who have trauma stories that they get to tell these trauma stories, right?
Wow.
And these trauma stories are so relatable to everybody who lives on this planet that we've had a huge amount of success because that's the way that we do it. And it's not rocket science. It's not drug induced. It's just relationship, 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 relationship. And then you wrap a community of people around them, right? We have this saying, we're going to love you until you can love yourself. Because that's what happened for me, was there was a community of people around me who loved me unconditionally, and they loved me until I could love myself. And today I'm at that place, right? And so now it's my turn to love people until they can love themselves, right? It's
That's fantastic.
Not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's very basic relationship stuff.
Well, I think, who can't get behind that? I think that that's, something that needs to be talked about more, that there needs to be more availabilities of outlets like that, like the two groups that you're just mentioning. I think it's fantastic. And I love that you've had this journey where, you started off as this, people see hockey players as some tough guys. I was told to ask you about goons, by the way, by my husband. And of course, I'm like, I don't even know what a goon is, but I'll ask him. But we'll get back to that. But you come from this, this hockey background. People have a certain expectation of you. And now the fact that you're out there telling people it's okay to not to feel okay, and there's help out there available, and here's where you can go. I think it's amazing. And not only has this been something that you've personally had to deal with, you've won awards for outstanding contributions to mental health of Canadians. You've done so many great things. Would you ever have guessed, as a young kid and at the time where you were facing some of these traumas that obviously built up inside of you, would you have ever guessed that you would be where you are today and be able to help people in the way that you obviously have?
Yeah. Well, not only have I been on this, sort of mental health, trauma, addictions journey, I've been on a spiritual journey as well. And what I've realized is that, God always had a plan for me. And the only time the plan went sideways was when I was running the show.
When you got in the way. It's so true.
Right?
Wow.
So 6,220 days ago, I hit my knees in a washroom and I surrendered. And I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. Okay? And ever since then, this has all happened because I made that choice to surrender. Fully, 100%, totally surrender and get the hell out of my own way, right? And realize that God has always had a plan for me. And so, did I ever think I'd be here? Yeah, I think I had inclinations throughout my life. And my whole success in my hockey career allowed me to have this big voice, right? Where people would actually listen to me and what I had to say. And so, everything has just lined up perfectly to get me to this place that I'm at today. And I'm very grateful and very blessed to be in the position that I am now. But I give all the credit to, the big guy upstairs, and all the adversity I'd faced in early part of my life really led me to where I am today. And so, I'm grateful I had my experience with my parents. I'm grateful that I had my experience with my sexual abuser. I'm grateful for all those things because those things have become total gifts in my life. Because without those experiences, I'm not talking to Laura Trump today. I'm doing something else, or I might not even be here. You know what I mean? So,
It's so true. It's so great that you can take some, several different things that, one of those alone may just be enough to take somebody down. They don't recover from those sort of things. And the fact that you're able to turn it around and look at them now, obviously in retrospect in a way, but as a positive, because it's made you who you are. You can relate to people who are dealing with these sort of experiences as well. It's led you down the path of being able to help people. What a gift. That's amazing. That's amazing that you're able to see it in that way, because I don't think a lot of people would. I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, and what, pain is the greatest motivator for change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, for the first half of my life, I lived in a lot of emotional pain and suffering. And I always couldn't connect the dots. And it wasn't until, I realized that if I kept going down the path that I was going down, like I was going to die. Wow. And not only was I, and it wasn't going to be quick, mm-hmm. right? Because, was it 18, 19 years ago, I had a fully loaded pistol in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger.
Oh, wow.
Not because I wanted to die, but I was exhausted from living in emotional pain and suffering for the majority of my life. And I tried everything on the planet to get rid of this pain. And one thing I hadn't tried yet was honesty, right? Was telling the story. And it was telling the story that changed my life. Like completely changed my life was when I actually told the story. And then I found my tribe, right? I found my tribe of people who had similar experiences as I had, right? Like I've had over 1 million people either indirectly or directly say those two words, me too, right? Sexual abuse victims and survivors have sought me out to tell me their stories. Why? Because they know that I'm a safe person, that they're not going to get judgment. They're not going to get ridicule. They're going to get somebody who is a compassionate, empathetic soul who's there to listen to those stories.
Amazing.
Without judgment.
Yeah.
Without judgment, right?
And I think everybody, anyone out there who is looking to get something off their chest, whatever it is, you're always looking for, someone like you. And that's how incredible to be that person. That's amazing that you've been able to provide people with an outlet of sorts, and they're able to come to you and at least get it off their chest and talk about whatever it is that's impacting them, and hopefully start their healing process, right? Because that's the very first step you would have to take. I want to ask you really quickly about a group you just launched called Canadians for Truth, because it's hard to find the truth out there in a lot of respects right now, wherever you are. Tell me a little bit about this group and what your goals are.
Well, the group was started in 2020 by a guy named Joseph Bourgault, who is a manufacturer who comes from small town Saskatchewan. Okay. And they created Canadians for Truth to talk about therapeutics, because nobody was talking about therapeutics. They weren't talking about the dangers of wearing masks and all this stuff. And then Joe went to Ottawa with the trucker movement, the convoy.
I wanted to ask you about that, because that was such a big deal here in America too, but go ahead with your story. I'll ask you in a sec. And
so Joe basically showed up in Ottawa and really was a big support for the truckers. So Joe spent a lot of his hard-earned money to purchase rooms for the truckers. He rented conference rooms and really got the whole entire convoy, once they got to Ottawa, organized so that it remained a peaceful protest. And while he was there, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada stepped down, which then opened up an opportunity for him to run for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. And that's where I come on board, because Joe called me and said, hey, Theo, I'm running. Would you campaign with me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so we went through the whole process of getting the signatures. We raised $400,000, which was $100,000 more than what we were supposed to. We submitted it all, and they kicked us out of the race because we were speaking too much truth to the thing, which then exposed not only the Conservative Party, but the whole entire government in Ottawa. There is not one party that represents the patriot voice, the freedom-loving Canadian voice. It's that corrupt in Canada. Okay?
That's terrifying. By the way, I think a lot of Americans tend to focus on ourselves here a lot. I mean, we got a couple of things going on, some things that are not going so well here in America, in fairness. However, when this trucker situation happened in Canada, I think that it was something that grabbed Americans, and we were so focused on making sure the right thing happened for the truckers. What do you think it was about that whole situation that really kind of, you had so much support, I think, here in America for the truckers and for their goals? Why do you think that became the big deal that it ultimately did?
Well, I think we've always envied the Americans for their patriotism. You know, in Canada, we're kind of laid back, really nice people, you know, all this stuff. And I really believe that it was the greatest act of patriotism we had ever seen in our whole entire lifetime, right? And it reminded me of when we played at the Olympics.
Oh, cool.
In hockey, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens every time we participate in the Olympics, what happens? Well, everybody goes into their closet, finds their red piece of clothing, right, that has something Canada on it.
Yeah.
Then we go out into our garage and we grab that tattered old, ripped up flag, and we sit in front of our TVs for 2 weeks and we live and die with our hockey teams, right?
Yeah.
And so what had happened was Canada was in a really deep, dark depression, right? There wasn't a whole lot of hope. There wasn't a whole lot of, we could just see our country deteriorating every week, every month, you know, and the truckers, what they did was they started this convoy, and what did we see happen? People went into their closets, grabbed their red clothing. They went into their garage and grabbed their flags and came out of their houses and were standing on the side of the road cheering these courageous people that really sort of sparked a new kind of patriotism in our country.
Yeah.
Right. And it was amazing. So I think the American people saw this incredible act of patriotism, which you guys are so famous for, and it sparked something inside them too.
I think you're so right. I think for a lot of us watching what was happening there, it was just totally insane. And it really felt like it was just sort of a microcosm of the whole COVID situation, all the lockdowns, all the nonsense, all the rules that didn't make any sense to anybody, that weren't even doing anything. And people were like, this is enough. And then I think you're right, to see all of the support from the Canadian people for these truckers. I mean, it was so great to see. And I love that, you know, you had, you know, your part in it, and that there were so many people that got involved, because I think that's what it's all about.
Well, I was ugly crying on my couch watching this. How overcome with emotion I was, because I'd never seen our country ever do anything like that ever in the history of my life. Maybe, you know, when I went to the Olympics twice, but this was on a spiritual level, right? This was
Yeah.
on a spiritual level. And so many incredible things happened during that time. And so, you know, to get back to what are we doing at Canadians for Truth? Well, we've built a media company because, you know, if you control the message, you control a lot of everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what happened was, you know, Trudeau started arresting people. He started shutting down bank accounts. And
Yep.
so what's happened in Canada is the Patriot movement has kind of imploded and people are afraid. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a new space and a new environment where everybody in the Patriot movement could come and feel safe, feel heard, feel listened to, you know, all that stuff. And so that's why we sort of expanded on Canadians for Truth. We had our first launch, sold out event, live show.
Wow.
And we would love for you and Eric and Don Jr. to come to Canada.
Oh, wow.
And do some stuff with us because
that's amazing. Well, I'm so flattered. We got to do it soon though, Theo, because I live in Florida now. I don't know if I can handle it up there in Canada. What's the temperature there these days?
Oh, it's still nice. Like it's fall. Like it's like Midwest. It's like Minnesota.
We got to do it soon. I know. I don't even know if I could go to Minnesota right now. I might freeze to death. No, it would be such an honor to participate in any freedom-loving event. Obviously, I think for any of us, I'll speak on behalf.
You know what was funny was when I went and did Tucker Carlson. Like Tucker had no idea how popular he was in Canada.
That's awesome.
It's the same with you guys.
Wow.
You know? Oh yeah. People like, especially in Western Canada, like if you guys came up here, people would absolutely go berserk if you guys came. And you would be so loved and welcomed here. I'm telling you, it would be so nice. It would be so awesome.
All right, well, let's plan a trip to Canada then, I guess.
Let's do it.
You could schedule some things for us to do. Maybe we could even get my husband on the ice with you just for a moment. And I want to go back very quickly, just so I covered my bases with him and I don't get divorced after this interview. We were talking when he found out that I was going to be interviewing you. He was very excited. And we were talking about the all-time hockey greats. And I mean, you're up there, you know, you're over 1,000 points and the whole thing. Obviously, there's so many accolades under your belt. And then we were scrolling through, we got to the top and there's Wayne Gretzky. Do you ever think, Theo, are we ever going to see someone surpass Wayne Gretzky, at least in scoring? I mean, will he remain like the greatest of all time forever, or would anybody be able to challenge him?
I don't think we'll see it in our lifetime. You know, you think about Wayne Gretzky has 3,000 points.
Yeah.
There's guys in the NBA that don't have 3,000 points in their career, and they get 2 and sometimes 3 points for a goal they score.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, I was very blessed to have played against him and played with him. And not only is he a great hockey player, but what I took away from the experience was he's a greater human being than he is a hockey player.
Wow.
And I think that as athletes, we want to be remembered for, you know, being good people, right?
Yeah, so true.
And you know, all of the superstars, and there was many that were in the league when I was playing, to a man, I would say they were greater human beings than they were hockey players. And that's what's so great about hockey, is that we all come from small towns.
Yeah.
We all grew up, you know, poor, and we dedicated our lives to our craft, and we worked hard and we played hard on the ice and off the ice, you know, so we were relatable to the people who bought tickets to come and watch us play.
But then you
you know?
also never forgot who you were before you became, you know, a hockey great, right? And I think that's really the bigger portion of it, because a lot of people who maybe start out, you know, by in very humble situations and then
Mhm.
rise to stardom, whatever it is that they do, whether it's in
Yeah.
sports or something else,
Mhm.
oftentimes those people forget the person they used to be, you know, where they started in life,
Yeah.
where they came from, their hometown, who they were.
Well,
And I love that, you know, it seems like, at least within the hockey world, that is not the case. That's a very nice thing to hear.
yeah. Well, you know, I got corrupted by money, you know, like
Wow, yeah.
late in my career, I went to New York and, you know, basically won the lottery, right? And what happened was it corrupted not only me, it corrupted my family, corrupted my
Wow.
friends, you know, and that's
Yeah.
when I hit the proverbial rock bottom. And then I had to get back to the basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
God had to become a big part of my life again because I had lost touch with that, and God brought me to my knees again, you know, and
That's
it's
how it goes.
amazing,
Yeah.
you know, and you know I've all, you know, without the fans, there is no me, right? Without them buying tickets and buying jerseys and hockey cards and all this stuff, you know, there isn't any me. And so now that I'm retired, now I get an opportunity to give back to all those people, you know, who loved me and supported me and, you know, hated me, whatever, whatever it was, you know.
Also an
But
important aspect. What's worse, Theo? Is it worse having had to deal with hockey fans from the opposing team or opposing political party supporters? What's worse?
well, I think they're both the same, you know. That's why, you know, uh, I'm not very well liked by the left in Canada,
Mm. Sometimes that's an
but
accolade.
but as a visiting opponent, it was the same,
Yeah, that
you
means
know.
you're doing your job right. That means you're doing something
Exactly.
right. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's so funny.
Exactly. So I've already played this role once in my life, and here I am again fighting for, fighting for freedom, because
Yeah, thank God.
because communism has reared its ugly head again, and we have to do everything within our power to empower other people that that freedom is the only way to go.
It certainly
You know,
is so true.
and
It's so true.
and the few times that I ran into your father-in-law, um, I was very impressed because you can tell a lot from a man's handshake.
Oh
And the
yeah.
very first time that your father-in-law shook my hand, he looked me in the eye, and I knew that he was a good soul, and he was a good
Yeah.
human being.
I love
And
that.
and and the way that the press has portrayed Mr. Trump is absolutely horrendous and horrific and horrible. And so, I want you guys to know that you guys have a lot of support up here,
Aw,
especially in Canada,
thank you.
because you guys took on something that you didn't have to, and you did for all of us to, be a little bit more courageous, be a little bit more outspoken, and we appreciate that.
Wow. Well, that's so nice of you to say. I appreciate you're saying that. That's so nice. And I feel like for all of us, I don't think any of us knew quite what we were signing up for with any
No,
of this. But once you see it in a way, you can't unsee it. And once we knew, like they haven't even stopped. They haven't stopped attacking us. They haven't stopped attacking my father-in-law. I don't know if they ever will. But we know that what we're fighting for is the right thing, that you're always on the right side of history when you fight for freedom and for people, who don't have the ability maybe to have their voices heard in the same way you do. It's always the right move.
yeah,
So thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I am a big supporter of you and your family and what you've
Thank
been
you.
through. I've watched from a distance them try to destroy every aspect of your beings, And all it does is it gives us people up here in Canada a lot of hope and a lot of inspiration. And so, I just wanted to say that on behalf of all of us, Canadians up here. So
thank you. Well, gosh, I guess we need to come to Canada sooner rather than later. I do want to ask you final question, and I think it just kind of segued perfectly. Would you ever run for political office? Why or why not?
Well, I still have a daughter who's 14 years old, and so I want to get her graduated, and then I will think about it.
Then we'll see. Okay.
But I can be a huge shit disturber in the meantime. and at Canadians for Truth, all we're trying to do is expose what the truth really is. That's it. And we come, God sits at the top of our organization. He's the CEO, and he's guided us so far to get to here. And where that ends up, I don't know, but we're just going to go with it. And
he's in charge, right?
Yeah. And, how does a hockey player and a Trump get together? I don't know. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So God has definitely something to do with this.
Yeah.
We're just going to keep going with it and keep praying and keep meditating, keep manifesting, that maybe one day, we'll be free again and prosperous and living in abundance. And, there's no more homeless people. There's no more people who are thinking about taking their own lives, and we can solve the trauma riddle and get back to, the greatness that I think God really wants us all to have.
I love that. Amen. We will be here fighting alongside of you for those same values and principles. I think it's so important. And Theo Fleury, I want to say thanks so much for joining us here on The Right View. It was amazing talking to you and getting your perspective on so many things. We'll stay in touch and we'll figure out a trip to Canada. Apparently, it's coming up. Maybe we'll put another episode together. But we appreciate you spending some time with us.
I would love to see all the Liberals' heads pop up in Canada. So we're gonna make it happen.
I love it. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And to everybody at home, as always, thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next time for more.